Guys, welcome to Spark Conversations. We're excited to have you guys joining with us. This is week one, so we're going to go from here, and we'll see how things move on. To start with, we got question number one. What is something that scares you guys?
One thing that really scares me is snakes, but something more personal is the unknown of life, is where am I going next in life? What am I going to do now that I'm done school? And where am I going to go to school next? And how am I going to start my career? And just the unknown is sometimes really scary.
For me, my fear is, I talked about, on Friday night, I talked about how heights is kind of a bit of a fear for me, which is weird because I like skydiving and stuff like that. But I'm terrified I'm kind of like Elias, the idea of falling kind of terrifies me. And I realized that I have a very, very present situation where this keeps on happening. And I've been playing a lot of Minecraft lately, and I've been building stuff up in the sky, and I'm like, I gotta make sure I'm crouching so I don't fall off, and I forget to crouch, and I fall off, and I'm like, that keeps me up at night. Okay, so guys, tell us a story of a time that you were afraid or had a terrifying experience.
For me, definitely, I had a story when I was 8. So I'll just keep this nice and short. I broke my elbow really bad on the trampoline when I was with my siblings, and it got to the point when I was getting rushed to the hospital that they weren't entirely sure how my arm was going to come out of it, if I was going to have any feeling, if I was going to have from my elbow down, period. And that was definitely a very worrisome time in my life. I enjoyed sports, and it was something that quite easily could have been stripped from me. It was just how I dealt with stress and anxiety, and just not a fun time in my life.
A few years ago when we lived in Germany, me and my family, I was hanging out with my brother at home, and the phone rang, and I answered. It was my dad, nothing unusual, but I gave the phone to my brother because he was a lot older than me, and I just saw my brother's face just drop and just go white. And he hung up the phone, and we waited for our mom to come home with our other siblings. Turns out my dad was on his way home from work on his motorcycle when he kind of got T-boned by a car. And yeah, it's not a fun way to go down. So the doctors and the people at the hospitals, they did all they could, and they fixed his legs, but they kind of neglected the one, and so he had major blood clots in his leg. And so he almost lost the other leg that they didn't try to save. So it was a whole mess, and it was a really, really scary situation for my mom because she was almost a widow with 5 kids, and it was a really scary time, and it was hard on my family. It kind of shook us all, and yeah, it's weird to just think about it and see the scars on my dad's legs these days. So yeah, it's not a pretty time to go through. It was really difficult, and we're all so gracious and so grateful that God saved him and kept him alive, and that I was able to grow up in a loving and caring home with both of my parents alive.
For me, mine is an incident that happened when I was 14, I believe, 14, 13, around that age. So I live out in the country, and there's on those farm roads and that, there's not a lot of vehicles. So often I'd go for a bike ride around every evening. And so I was going out just like normal. I see this truck coming, he was probably a good quarter of a kilometer away. So I pulled my bike onto the grass to the side. I wasn't pedaling, I was just stopped there. And then I looked down at my watch because I was just checking the time. And then suddenly I look back, and he's swerved over right where my tire is, because my bike tire was slightly sticking out onto the road. Not a great deal, but he swerved over, hit my tire. I flew off into the ditch, and it seemed like when it was leading up to that point, I was just in slow motion, and I was my whole body was tensed up, and I was that was probably the most scared I'd ever been. Luckily, I only came out with a few scratches, and unfortunately, we still don't know who did it to this day because he just drove right off.
So for question 3, when Jesus talks about don't let your heart be troubled and just being able to trust in him and have faith, just what does that speak to you on like a personal level?
Yeah, for me, I think it's a lot of don't worry about what you can't control. There's a lot of things in life, and really the only thing you can control is yourself. And you can't really control what other people do or what happens around you. And I think that's kind of where you have to trust in God to be working in the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a
To-
lot of stuff that like, you have no control over, so worrying about it isn't going to fix anything. It's
Yeah.
just wasting your life.
Yeah, and you can't control how other people are going to react or what they're going to do in a situation. So I think that's when you have to trust God the most.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when we feel like we don't have control is one of the best places to be, because we have to fully rely on God. A lot of times, I think as people, we try to fight for control. We try to fight for what we can just wrap our minds or wrap our hands around, so we can keep ourselves or keep things safe or keep things under control. But for a lot of things, control is just an illusion. We don't ever really have control in a lot of stuff. We have the ability to influence things, but we can't control things. And one of the biggest things we can work on, or one of the things that we can control is how we respond to things, how we let things impact us. So yeah, that's good. When Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled, for me, it speaks of the idea, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the fear as the thing that is controlling your life, or are you focusing on God? Because when you just focus on the fear, whatever you focus on tends to grow in your life. When you focus on fear, that tends to be something that builds and builds and builds and builds. When you focus on trusting God, it's one of those things that continues to grow in you. And I think that's where you find that peace that Jesus talks about, is when you've let go of the fear and you put your trust and your faith and your life in God's hands. How do you combat worry and anxiety in your guys' life? Because let's face it, we all face fears at different times. So what do you guys do when it comes?
I think a lot of the time, if I know it's a situation where I have little to no control over, I'll pray about it and try and read my Bible and try and find verses on anxiety and what to do during anxiety, like fear and anxious moments, and ways to trust in God more in those situations.
I think when I grow up, I want to be more like you, Hillary, because I know that's what I should do in a lot of situations, but for me, when I feel like anxiety or I feel worried, I'm an avoider. I like to just like get my mind somewhere else. I like to just shut down, play video games, or watch a movie and just like try and tune things out. But like we talked about on Friday, there's a lot of stuff that pops up that seems like a solution, but really it's a very temporary solution. It doesn't solve the problem. It just pushes it off till later and oftentimes makes it worse. So yeah, I think there's points where I try to just avoid, but when I get myself in the right place, I realize, the only way that this is going to get fixed is to put my trust in God and really rely on what He has for me.
So just something that I've always leaned on in the past, and even now too, is as weird as it sounds, is sometimes physically exhausting myself after I felt mentally exhausting is almost a better thing. Because maybe it's because I've done sports since I could barely walk. I've been playing basketball and various different sports, running. I love running. So leaning on aspects like that where I'm wanting to tire myself to almost forget. I know it's not always healthy or anything, but like trying to move past the mental anguish to put my physical anguish on there, because then my body feels tired, so I'm not thinking about what has been troubling me or anything like that. But I know as I've gotten older, I've put more of a trust in God to a level, and it's obviously been challenged more and more throughout my life. But I definitely had some bad habits that didn't help me, and unfortunately have impacted the future too. But I've also started to develop better ones where I'm putting more faith in God. I'm trusting in God. I'm not just saying that I am a Christian. I'm trying to put faith and my belief fully into it.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this week's Spark Conversations. We would love to hear how you guys respond to some of the stuff. We talked about some of these things on Friday. Maybe you guys weren't here on Friday, so we would love to engage with you guys. And we'd love to hear more about how you guys work through fear and anxiety and worry, because that's a dominant thing in our world today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, comment or message us with any questions you might have. We'll also have a box set up at Youth on Friday for you to put in anonymous questions that you might not want to ask with your name attached. And we will get to answer those in a future video.